What you're really discussing is the establishment of we are a Christian nation.
Yes, it is a Christian nation. There's a reason that judges and presidents and governors and historians and everyone else for 300 years said we were. Now, just because today we don't know what that is doesn't mean it wasn't true for three centuries. See, what they knew that we don't pay attention to today is that when this third period of Christianity came along, this period of Reformation, it resulted in massive changes across the world. Now, what was cool was when these Reformation-minded people came to America, they had something in America we didn't have in Europe. In America, they've come to a virgin land. They're not having to fight the apostasy of the last 12 centuries. There's not been an Inquisition over here. There's not been a corrupted form of Christianity. They get to plant the pure stuff right here on virgin soil, and so it grows really fast. One of the things you'll find that in every nation where the reformers were working to get people back to the Bible, one of the characteristics was they went to a republican form of government. You'll find the monarchies went away, republics rose. That's a characteristic of a Christian nation, is a republican form of government. It's what we have in America. It's a good thing we're a Christian nation. We like having a republican form of government. Where do we get that? The Bible teaches that you should elect your own leaders. See, the divine right of kings, the monarchs are saying, hey, God's into kings. There's 6 books in the Bible that deal with kings, Kings and Chronicles and Samuel. And by the way, we have King David and King Saul and King Solomon and Rehoboam and Jeroboam, and that's right. The Bible has a lot to say about kings. But the Bible also tells us that God sent the prophet Samuel to the people to say, you don't want kings. Bad idea.
Well, and he said, I'll give you a king, but they'll rule you.
And they will. And they'll rule. And you know what was really interesting is he got specific. He said, here's what will happen to your military. Here's what will happen to your property taxes. He went through all these things that would happen if they got a king. They said, we want a king. Well, the reformers come along and say, you know, we've had kings for 1,400 years, but that's not the way God wanted it first. What was the first thing God wanted? Exodus 18:21, choose out from among you leaders of tens, 50s, 100,000s. So getting back to the Bible made us a republican form of government. That's the first thing that came out of the Reformation. So a Christian nation in the last 500 years means you have a republican form of government. I think everyone enjoys that. Second thing is it was the Reformation that came up with separation of church and state. Everyone enjoys that today, too. We appreciate the fact that the government can't tell us how to worship or when to worship or where to worship, and that the church can't go to the government and say, execute this guy. He doesn't believe the right thing. Where did that come from? That came from the Reformation, getting back to the biblical teachings. So that's a second characteristic. We appreciate that. The third characteristic was freedom of conscience. You see, every one of the reformers, many were put to death for what they believed about the Word of God. Simply their beliefs got them killed. Tyndale and Huss and other guys were killed because they wanted people to read the Bible in the common man's language. Well, if you don't allow freedom of conscience, then you can't get this other stuff out there. If you're going to have someone control what you think, where'd freedom of conscience come from? It came from all the reformers, all these Christian guys. So when you start a Christian nation, one of the things you find is freedom of conscience.
Although Noah Webster taught students that our form of government could not survive unless we kept godly, God-fearing people of faith in office, doesn't the security of our particular form of government really depend upon the people rather than upon their representatives? After all, in a democracy, aren't the people the most important aspect? This is part of our problem today. We think we're a democracy. We're not. Recall, when we pledge allegiance to the flag, we pledge allegiance to the Republic of the United States, not the democracy of the United States. While few today can define the difference between the two, there is a difference, a big difference. Our founding fathers had an opportunity to establish a democracy, and they chose not to. They specifically chose to establish a republic. In their minds, we were not and were never to become a democracy. Founding Father Fisher Ames declared, "A democracy is a volcano which conceals the fiery materials of its own destruction. These will produce an eruption and carry desolation in their way." Founding Father Benjamin Rush was equally pointed. He noted, "A simple democracy is the devil's own government." Founding Father John Adams stated, "Remember, democracy never lasts long. It soon wastes, exhausts, and murders itself. There never was a democracy yet that did not commit suicide." So strongly did the founders oppose a democracy that when they created the Constitution, they included a provision to keep America from becoming a democracy. Article 4, Section 4 of the Constitution requires that each state maintain a republican form of government. A republican form of government as opposed to a democratic one. That is, to be a republic, not a democracy. What then is the difference between a democracy and a republic? Noah Webster explained that difference. He told students, "Our citizens should early understand that the genuine source of correct Republican principles is the Bible, particularly the New Testament or the Christian religion. The difference between a republic and a democracy is the source of its authority. In a democracy, whatever the people desire is what becomes policy. If a majority of the people decide that murder is no longer a crime, in a democracy, murder will no longer be a crime. However, not so in our republic. In our republic, murder will always be a crime, for murder is always a crime in the Word of God. It is this foundation which has given our republic such enduring stability, for since man does not change, he continues to need the same restraints he has always needed. It is the rights and wrongs revealed in the Bible which have provided those guidelines for our republic."
You are teaching us the most incredible history Bible lesson that I've ever heard, that is all establishing the foundation that we're talking about today, which is America is
A Christian nation?
Christian
And what it
nation.
breeds is hope.
Oh,
Yeah.
You're giving us
we're
hope.
seeing it.
Well-
When we can see it, Dave, when that's who we were, we can be that
We can be
again.
that. And see, part of it is recognizing that's who we were. Because these characteristics didn't pop up. These characteristics we're talking about did not come from secular philosophers.
Right.
It was not secular people that came up with separation of church and state. It was not secular people who came up with republican forms of government. It was not secular people who came up with freedom of conscience. It was Christian leaders using the Bible. And these are the civic virtues that we love today.
Yeah.
But we fail to recognize where they came from.
Well, and that foundation is still there. Nobody can take that away.
Well, they're chipping away at it. As a matter of fact, the fourth characteristic of a Christian nation is that it's able to distinguish between theology and behavior. In other words, we can have the Ten Commandments. The court says that's theological. You can't have that. We say that's not theological. That's behavioral. Don't steal and don't kill and don't perjure yourself. That's not a theology issue. That's a behavioral issue.
Right.
So what we're able to do in a Christian nation is say, look, we don't pass laws telling you how to baptize people. We don't pass laws telling you what kind of communion to do, transubstantiation or consubstantiation. We don't pass laws telling you what kind of church government to have, whether it's eclectic form of government or Presbyterian. We don't do that. But we will pass laws that tell you don't kill, don't steal, don't purge yourself. And yes, they are found in the Bible, but that doesn't make them theological. See, Christian nation, you'll find that Christian nations will legislate on behavioral things that are found in Scriptures, but they don't legislate on theological things that are found in the Scriptures. And so that's where America has been from the very beginning. We allowed freedom of conscience. Now, we did say the law of God is going to be the law of the land, and that's why the Ten Commandments hang in government buildings and not church buildings, because they're behavioral.
A closer look into our nation's history reveals surprising and irrefutable evidence of the Bible's influence on our founding fathers and our nation's Constitution. But does a biblically inspired Constitution make America a Christian nation? And is there a place for the Bible in today's society? Discover our nation's godly history in the American Heritage series. America, this is your heritage.